Now, consumers are being deliberately misled by suppliers, some of whom deface food labels, says the National Consumer Commission, who aims to investigate 18 food suppliers in KwaZulu-Natal. The Commission is the regulatory body which aims to protect consumers and ensure that there's accessible, transparent and efficient redress for consumers. There's been growing concerns about food safety practices and the lack of enforcement of regulations following the deaths of more than 20 children from foodborne illnesses. NCC Head of Complaints and Investigations, Prudence Moilwa, joins us for more. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, since government declared the spate of food poisoning a national disaster, I would imagine that there's a lot on your plate. Talk to us about some of the scope of your work during such a time.
Yes, indeed, we have our work cut out for us. Yeah. But as the Commission, the strategy has always been following the market monitoring inspections. Now we're moving in with formal investigations with a view to either conduct product recalls or to prosecute. Now, the visuals that you see in the background, those are our senior inspectors who were today in Verulam. They attended to the warehouse that was implicated in the sale of the biscuits that you see there. Mm-hmm. What we picked up during our inspection is that most of the suppliers in KZN, we're actually sourcing their products from this particular warehouse. And what we did today is go into the warehouse together with our partners, the environmental health practitioners on the ground, as well as our senior inspectors there, as you can see. Now, what we have found is the issue of labeling. As also the President indicated, the issue of food safety also centers on the issues of food labeling because we don't know what people are eating. The date markings on the products and as well as the markings that you see there. The problem with those is that what the inspectors found on the ground was that the date markings were actually the dates of manufacturing. And as you can see, those days do not necessarily provide consumers with enough information regarding whether or not the food that they're consuming has expired. Another indication that we saw there was the fact that the trade descriptions were not there in terms of the ingredient list and also just generally the state of those biscuits. And we do understand that people might look at the fact that the prices that they're being sold at are low and think that they're getting a bargain. The challenge with that is that the conditions within which they are stored, the packaging itself, as well as the date markings on there are not in terms of what is expected in terms of the Consumer Protection Act. So as we move in like this, following the market monitoring, we are now conducting serious investigations or formal investigations with a view of either prosecuting or ensuring that all these goods are withdrawn from the markets.
As you try and investigate this matter, you'll of course have to trace the steps on where the source of the food is, who the supplier is, and that in itself. What have you established? And I know you also mentioned prosecution. Perhaps also expand on where accountability would lie.
Yes. I must say today when we got to the warehouse, because as you correctly indicate, we no longer just go to the stores now, we're targeting the warehouses. As I said, this particular warehouse is actually the one where we would get to the particular either spaza shops or other traders where we found that the similar biscuits were sourced from this particular warehouse. Hence, in our plan, in terms of our strategy, we then moved to the warehouse itself to go to the source. And that is why our inspectors were there today. So in terms of this, then what it does mean is that when we stop from supply, where the biscuits are coming from, then we can then ensure that they are not further distributed to other suppliers in the retail space as well as the spaza shop. In terms of prosecution, obviously the evidence that we currently have, when the inspectors come back to office, we will then have to prepare for prosecution. As you know, in terms of the Consumer Protection Act, violations of the Consumer Protection Act, if the tribunal agrees with the Commission, are up to 10% of the annual turnover, as well as as 1 million rand, depending on which one is the most appropriate. Now, what we also hope, because we also work with environmental health practitioners, we also hope that they will also institute their own proceedings against violations in terms of the Health Act as well. And what we can say with this particular inspection today or investigation today, there are plans so that on Thursday, the destruction of those things that have been collected or the biscuits will then happen. So the plan is that the EHPs will pick them up. We will also follow up with a proper product recall for all the supply chain that has led to the stores, for all those products to be brought back so that they can be destroyed.
Recall could be problematic. I mean, you make mention of how there's an issue of labeling, and that in itself, in terms of identifying what you're eating, the packaging it came in, that could be a big challenge. Someone could have already consumed these biscuits and not even aware that when you call for a recall, you're talking about the very products that they consumed perhaps a day or two ago.
What we want to say to consumers, if they have bought such products, if they do have them, when we do institute a recall, we would like them to return them to the place of purchase. But what we are interested in right now is the stop sell. We want the retailers that have them in the store to return them to the warehouse so that the destruction can happen appropriately under the watchful eye of the EHPs in the area. So it's very important that as the first measure, we want those biscuits to be sent back to the warehouse, so that we can, from that point on, ensure that they are properly destroyed. So also consumers who have bought this, if they can also contact the National Consumer Commission or bring them back to the place of sale, because all the suppliers of this, even the retailers, they are aware that the Commission has raised concern, and we have asked them to remove them from the shelves. So if they're still there, please remove them. And if they are not, then our product recall procedures will also come in to assist to make sure that consumers are not exposed.
I ask you about the labeling and identification, because that in itself could prove problematic, because what happens in the bulk form? I mean, we've seen how those transparent packets are used to have a few biscuits gathered in there. Are you not concerned that perhaps one may not even be aware that they've consumed biscuits that come from such a warehouse?
So the food suppliers that you mentioned before are suppliers where we were able to identify that they on-sell these products, right? So those ones, at least as the Commission, we've been able to identify the retailers that sell these products. And I think the only fortunate part is that the manufacturer is very cooperative at this point. I think he now realizes the seriousness of his conduct. He's been very open with regard to where he has sold the products, also to assist the Commission in making sure that all retailers bring it to the store. And hence this statement that I just made to say the retailers that have sold this product have been also warned to say don't on-sell it, and consumers who will bring them back, they will be able to be refunded in terms of our product recall strategies.
And very quickly, I asked you about the source, just to establish whether the products, the biscuits, are made locally or perhaps from elsewhere.
What is interesting is on the packaging, which is something that we still need to follow up on. It does look like the products that are being sold have been imported into the country. Now, that is also worrisome, because it then means that the time that it has taken for these goods to be kept in the warehouse, number one, cannot necessarily be determined, hence the recall. So the recall itself is not necessarily around the fact that the goods are unsafe, but on the basis of the labeling itself. So we have not been able to even determine the expiry dates of these products because of the problematic labeling of it. So on the basis of that, we then raise the issue of safety. Our inspectors have also taken some of the samples. The Commission will be working with the SABC in order to test around the safety aspects of this biscuits as well. That will also determine the process going forward for purposes of prosecution and the further enforcement action that we intend to take.
Very well. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening.